Hey everyone, so this is the third little video I'm making. I hope I hope these are worth something to you. Um, I truthfully do miss talking to people and sharing, thoughts with you. So hopefully these are valuable. In this one, I'm going to be talking about First Peter 2:13 through 25, and there's really a couple of different things that come out of this that I want to share with you. And then again, I'm going to be reading from Calvin Miller's book on patience, and I'll ask you a few questions kind of at the end to think about there. So First Peter 2:13 through 25. Be subject for the Lord's sake to every human institution, whether it be to the emperor as supreme or to governors as sent by him to punish those who do evil and to praise those who do good. For this is the will of God, that by doing good you should put to silence the ignorance of foolish people. Live as people who are free, not using your freedom as a cover-up for evil, but living as servants of God. Honor everyone. Love the brotherhood. Fear God. Honor the emperor. Servants, be subject to your masters with all respect, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the unjust. For this is a gracious thing. When mindful of God, one endures sorrows while suffering unjustly. For what credit is it if, when you sin and are beaten for it, you endure? But if when you do good and suffer for it you endure, this is a gracious thing in the sight of God. For to this you have been called, because Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example so that you might follow in his steps. He committed no sin, neither was deceit found in his mouth. When he was reviled, he did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but continued entrusting himself to him who judges justly. He himself bore our sins in his body on the tree, that we might die to sin and live to righteousness. By his wounds you have been healed. For you were straying like sheep, but have now returned to the shepherd and overseer of your souls. I think we normally break this into two separate thoughts. They're obviously one, but I kind of want to break them that way first, and then I'll kind of tie them back together. First, we're being told to submit ourselves to authority, and I've seen these verses used a whole lot, social media and in the news and places like that, to remind Christians that there is earthly authority over us and that we're supposed to follow along with it. But I don't think what's really happening here is that Peter is telling us that Jesus wants us to create a hierarchy where like we're here and then government officials are here and then God is here. That's not how it works. Those people are not above us in the heavenly realm. They may be controlling us here on earth. The reason that we're being told to submit ourselves to them is because we're supposed to be humble and loving and good and kind to everyone. And if we are constantly rebelling against the structures that are created for us in society, are we really showing love and goodness to others? I think what's happening here is that when we submit to those leaders, we show them love and understanding, and that they will see the love and understanding of God in our submission. If we're fighting to make our human lives better, then we're actively trying to destroy those people, and that's not showing them love or anything like that. Think if you have an unjust tyrant ruling over you, and you show them love and kindness, they may continue to be unjust to you, but they might see your love and kindness and change. If you have an unjust tyrant ruling over you, and you kill them, they cannot find Jesus. They cannot find the love of Christ because they have been killed. Now, I'm oversimplifying this. I know that. Our lives require nuance. There's a whole lot about the world that sometimes does require us to do the things like that. And there's plenty of examples in the Bible of God justifying people, to stop someone who's harming others. If you think about it, if you have an unjust tyrant ruling over you, and they're preventing you from sharing the gospel with others around you, then they may have to be removed, and that may be God's will as well. But anyway, think about it like that. How can we show love to everybody? How can we draw them closer to Christ? If we make those our goals, then we'll see the world in kind of a different way. Now, the second thing that's happening here is Peter's talking to servants and slaves and people who are suffering about how their suffering is good, and that Christ suffered and it was good. It wasn't just good, it was perfect and holy, and his suffering led to justification for everyone, because we were straying like sheep, but we have now returned to the shepherd and overseer of our souls. Like through that suffering, we can be like Christ, and maybe it can draw us closer to Christ. So in that mindset, I want to read you the verses from Calvin Miller or not verses, I'm sorry, paragraphs. So one cannot read this passage in the book of Peter without being reminded that in Philippians 3:10, Paul promised that we will become spiritually mature by sharing in the fellowship of Christ's sufferings. Peter wrote this passage to help slaves find some meaning in the severity of their abuses. He could not answer all the slaves' questions on the subject, but their pain is a reminder to us that suffering can cause us to focus on God, and that focus will steady us in the painful walk through the valley of our travails. Pain, how we turn from it. When we are under its muddy gloom, we rarely find the strength to, as it says in 1 Thessalonians 5:18, give thanks in all circumstances. Yet beyond the hurt and struggle, we realize that had it not been for the pain, we would not have gained a clearer picture of Christ. Pain is never ours alone. I remember a time when our when our village doctor had to put some stitches in our little girl's forehead. She had received a deep gash on the front of her face when her very small brother threw his pegboard at her. I'm sure that Skylar Palumbo can relate to having a deep gash on his forehead right now. I could not help but notice that as the doctor made his stitches, she fixed her eyes on her mother's eyes, and the interlocking of their gazes made her pain bearable. This is something like the lesson Peter gave those who had suffered for no good reason. Fix your eyes on the eyes of God, he essentially said, and while the pain will be there, gazing patiently on your Father in heaven will turn your hurt into a season of blessing in your life. In time, you will see it as such a blessing that if you had your whole life to live once again, you would not leave this painful season out, for your suffering will have meaning like that of Christ, who when he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. What have your painful experiences taught you about God's love for you? What have your painful experiences taught you about God's love for you? I think we all have individual painful experiences that we can think about. Yesterday, I shared a video with you. A friend of mine from graduate school named Jordan Yarborough reflecting on a car accident she had 6 years ago and how she didn't think about how terrible the car accident was, but how God had saved her in a situation where she probably should have died, and how that life she was being renewed. And in the renewal of that life, she realized, oh, well, God saved me. I'm supposed to use my life to serve him. So in that painful moment, she realized something different. This is a very personal example. When Heather and I had first decided we wanted to have children, this is again in graduate school, she got pregnant, and it was an extremely exciting time for us. But at 10 weeks in, she miscarried, and it was horrible and sad, and probably the lowest moments of our life. But not to diminish that horror or pain, because it doesn't. I still feel that all the time, and I know that Heather does as well. But if it weren't for that, we wouldn't have had Adelaide. And that suffering led to an incredible blessing in our lives that continues to grow and bloom and bring us joy and show us Christ every day. So what have your painful experiences taught you about God's love for you? For me, it's taught me that he's there, and that he will continue to bless us, and that God doesn't see us as a cup full of painful experiences. He sees us as his creation, and he wants to bless us anew every day. So here's my second question for you. How can you remain upbeat and positive even in the midst of suffering and pain? Look around the world today, and there's endless suffering and pain. It seems more so than normal. So how can we remain upbeat and positive in this? Well, I want to share with you an example from a book I used to teach. I ran into a student at Publix a few weeks ago, and he said, "Hey, Giles, you've been preparing us for this moment all along." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Oh, when we read The Road, it was just like this." So The Road is a novel by Cormac McCarthy that he wrote it about. He wrote it in 2007. And in the novel, the world has been destroyed in a nuclear holocaust. Everyone is dead except for a man and his son, and a few scattered other people. But the other people that are scattered around, for the most part, are so degraded, they're so vile, that they're cannibals. They're eating what other people they can find. And the man and his boy are focused on carrying the fire. That's what they say over and over again. They want to be the good guys. They want to carry the fire. And the boy doesn't really fully understand what this means as the novel goes on. But their goal is to just survive and continue to be good in the society. And when I used to read it with the students, everyone would complain about how bleak and dark and depressing it was. But the more you focus on the story, the more you realize something deeply important is happening. So the man had lived in the world that we live in. And he had spent his whole life, kind of suffering through the daily stuff that we have to do and complaining that he didn't get to spend enough time with his family. Well, this world that's created in the road through the nuclear holocaust strips away everything. There's no more jobs. There's no more sports. There's no more TV. There's no more bills. There's no more stresses at all. There's just him and his boy. And so all he does for his whole lifetime inside this world is spend time with his son. And the further you go in the novel, the more you realize that it's a huge blessing. The world's destruction has created a moment where he and his son have this completely unrestricted, unguarded love and relationship for one another. I've been thinking about how the last couple weeks with my kids at home has created unrestricted family time for the first time maybe ever. We have nothing to stop us from just being with one another. Buddy was making fun of me yesterday. He called me and we talked for like 45 minutes. And at the end of it, I told him I needed to go. And Buddy just says, Brad, you can say you need to go, but right now I know no one really needs to go because you don't have anywhere to go. And I was like, yeah, you got me, buddy. It's true. I have time to talk on the phone and be with people. So how can you remain upbeat and positive even in the midst of suffering and pain? Focus your eyes on God. What a wonderful time we have right now to read the Bible, to pray, to love those around us, to watch endless church services. I saw where Jen Palumbo said she went to church 3 times on Sunday. Well, I challenge you to do that. I got to watch some church live streams from places that I've always wondered about yesterday, and it was great actually to just sit and think about God's word for a little bit longer. So I challenge you to do the same. Take this time, use it to God's glory, and He will bless you, even if there's suffering in the world. All right, guys, on Sunday, I'll be back with a live stream. I'm not sure what the format of that will look like quite yet, but we continue to experiment and to just bravely move forward in this situation as best we can.